We're going to let people join. The waiting room are opening up, so just give us a few minutes. Thanks. Hello again and welcome. My name is Jen Bowser and I am the Operations Officer for CUCSA. My home campus is UC Santa Barbara, where I am the Sustainable Procurement Program Manager and Small Business Officer. Prior to joining UC Santa Barbara in February, I had served nearly 8.5 years at UC San Diego. I'm really happy to welcome everyone today. Thank you for joining us over Zoom. This is the first time that we've invited guests to join our final work group presentations, and we're delighted to have you here to hear their findings and recommendations. I'd also like to recognize the delegation. They have spent dedicated, extensive time and hard work on these work groups, and so thank you to all of you serving. And as the internal operations officer, I would like to acknowledge my own work group members, as we will not be presenting today. They are assisting behind the scenes. So thank you to Austin, Katie, Veronica, and Roberta. I'd now like to read the land acknowledgement on behalf of UC San Francisco. We would like to acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that UCSF sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue the tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ramaytush Ohlone community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties and continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. So here with us today in person is the CUCSA delegation, a few members of the UCSF Staff Assembly. We have the staff advisor to the Regents designate, Joe Magnus, and also from UCOP, Julian Martinez and Jay Henderson. Today you will hear presentations from the Advancement, Total Compensation, Wellness and Staff Experience, and the CUCSA Strategic Plan Work Group. Each group will have 15 minutes to present, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A from the in-person delegation. After all 4 work groups have concluded their presentations, there will be an open Q&A session where we will be facilitating the questions from the Zoom audience. The Zoom audience will remain muted, so please use the Q&A function to submit your questions, and then those questions will be posed to our work group chairs. We will get to as many questions as we can today, and any that we don't address, we will follow up by email. Lastly, the session is being recorded. So before we begin, I would like to introduce the chair of CUCSA, Dennis McIver from UCOP, where Dennis is the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Program Manager. Prior to joining UCOP, Dennis worked at UC Riverside, and he has 7.5 years of experience, or service, excuse me. Dennis.
Thank you very much, Jen, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us today, both those who are here in person as well as virtual. Now, the presentations you'll see today represent the culmination of more than a year's worth of efforts, but we wanted to make a point to talk about why we chose these work groups. And it was specifically in response to the 2021 Staff Engagement Survey. And in reviewing that, we saw 3 recurrent themes that came up in the results. One of compensation, one of career advancement, and then one of wellness. And because each of these influences a staff member's decision to stay or to leave, we felt it was important to consider all of them with a focus on retention. As an executive board, we also felt it was very important to create a sustainable roadmap for the future of CUCSA over the next few years, and that prompted the creation of the Strategic Plan Work Group. When it comes to today, what you should know is our concern was making sure that these findings were available system-wide. We wanted to make sure that they were actionable and that we empowered our local staff assemblies to be able to do work with this. And we hope that the next 2 hours will accomplish these goals as well as more. And as I conclude my few remarks, I just want to emphasize that none of the work of CUCSA rests with one person, and none of our success rests with one person. So I did want to acknowledge a few people. First, I wanted to thank our executive board, which besides me includes John Bodenschatz, as well as Jim Bowser, and also Crystal Petrini out of UC Riverside, who provided us with vision and collaboration in creating this moment. I also wanted to give a special thank you to Erin Bouchon from UC Riverside, who provided our work groups with training in public speaking. And I also wanted to acknowledge all of our partners in system-wide human resources, which includes Missy Matella, as well as Jay Henderson, who provided guidance and advice to our groups as they came together, but also to Julianne Martinez, as well as Melisandra Leonardos, who provided daily operational support. And I think it's very important to give special acknowledgement as well to Marie Hairston, who for years provided support to CUCSA and has now moved over into a very vital role within the office. And perhaps most importantly, I want to thank my work groups who put in the work over the past year to make this moment a success. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to John Bodenschatz, who is our CUCSA chair-elect from UC Irvine. He is the Director of Finance for the School of Humanities and has 27 years of service. John?
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. And hello to those of you joining us here in the room and also online. As Jen mentioned, you'll be hearing from these 4 work groups. And I'd like to take a moment to notice and acknowledge the work group chairs. So for advancement, we have Jeremy Brooks from UC Berkeley. For total compensation, Nathan McCall at UC Santa Cruz. For wellness and staff experience, Shira Minard with UC Santa Barbara. And for CUCSA strategic plan, that's Jeremy Thacker with UCI. We'll begin today with the presentation from the advancement work group and Jeremy Brooks.
All right, thank you, John.
Very good.
All right, so our work group consists of these lovely individuals up here. So my name is Jeremy Brooks. I represent UCB. We have Andrea Grazer from UCSF, Lucine Terosian from UCLA, Nellie Lopez from LBNL, and Agam Patel from UCR. Unfortunately, we also have Erica White. She couldn't join us today from UCOP, but she's here in spirit. So to start us off, talking a bit about our work group, our agenda is pretty simple. We're just going to give you a bit of a background on our work, the areas of focus, and recommendations overall from our findings. So I'll start us off by talking a bit about the scope for this work group. So we had a project charge, which entailed a lot of information, a lot of questions, but it was really boiled down to one major question, which you can see on the slide. How can our current advancement infrastructure be refined and enhanced to help retain UC staff? We also had a really valuable resource, which was the 2021 core report on advancing UC, retaining our workforce. And this offered a lot of recommendations on advancement. So we created a table and chose to focus on a few of those in particular and mentioned different areas that we could focus on. We knew we couldn't tackle everything within advancement. A lot of things weren't necessarily within our scope within this year to work on. We know some of the things fall maybe under the wheelhouse of HR, but we chose these different 5 areas to focus on. And the hope with the areas of focus really was to learn more about what's happening in the areas, provide an overview, and then give best practices and recommendations. And we chose to really hone in as well on meeting with UC leaders and CHROs, because we know for the work of advancement, a lot of it comes down to CUCSA's relationship with HR and making sure advancement procedures and protocols move forward well. So I will pass it over to my colleague, Andrea, to talk about the core report.
So the core report included 5 key themes. These were to adopt a relational rather than a transactional management approach, invest in employee training and development, provide reasonable scheduling flexibility, as well as offer competitive compensation. And lastly, streamline processes for resources and retention. From those 5 key themes, we focused in on 2 of them, the invest in employee training and development and streamlining processes for resources and retention. From those, there were recommendations from the Coro report that we then narrowed our focus further. First was recommendation A, which was to increase engagement among supervisors, managers, and human resource staff to enhance shared knowledge of career advancement practices, policies, and best practices. Recommendation C, make internal recruitment and promotion procedures clear and accessible for all. And lastly, recommendation E, which was to actively promote system-wide tools and resources. And these 3 recommendations helped us further focus our work. And I will hand it off to Jeremy to speak a bit more about next steps.
All right, so now we're going to get into the areas of focus. Each person was really owning one particular area of focus. So mine was meeting with UC leaders and CHRO, so I'll speak to that. And one thing I wanted to add to at the beginning of this, it was clear there was some inconsistency with the different locations on how often they meet with their CHROs and UC leaders. So they just having more consistencies of having maybe those meetings set up, whether it's with the chancellor or CHRO, would really be helpful for the different locations to make sure that we are taken seriously on campuses and locations, and that we're actually having these meetings throughout the year. We came up with a template agenda to help guide these meetings to talk about advancement strategies and include a lot of things on the agenda, but some things in particular we asked our different UC leaders and CHROs were what advancement strategies are already put in place, what particularly at your location are you excited about, what's maybe coming down the pipeline. And so just really trying to dig in and understand what's happening at each location. We also really wanted to encourage supervisors to make professional development a priority because we know that doesn't always happen from every department and every location. So really trying from the top down to incentivize the CHROs to tell their supervisors, hey, this is a priority to make this for all staff. Some of the key takeaways, I won't read through all of them, but some of the things we wanted to highlight, we're just really focusing on the quality of supervisors and trainings is very clear from meeting that is really important to the employee experience. And we saw this too in our last meeting. We went over exit survey data, and this really impacts staff's opportunities for advancement is how willing their supervisor is to support them, right? So really focusing on that training for supervisors and quality of supervisors. We also heard from quite a few people that staff fellowship programs have been effective in the past and might be good to kind of reintroduce. They do require funding, but they allow staff to try out other types of positions within their location and see how they could actually advance at their location or within UC as well, so we can help retain them. A couple other things were, one, we heard more about the work of the train directors. And this is something that we want to focus on a little bit more, is maybe partnering directly, CUCSA, with the training directors, the different locations, to come up with strategies to really engage and train our staff. And finally, if we can just work with UCOP as CUCSA to help navigate and find and share career track information as that's been rolled out for the different locations, I think that will be helpful just for employees to understand what options are available to them. So now I will pass it over to Lucine to talk about existing resources.
Thank you, Jeremy. Another area that we focused was identifying and promoting existing resources. As part of the University of California's mission to provide public service and advanced knowledge, UC provides education and training to its employees and the public. In reviewing these offerings, we identified the following existing system-wide career and professional development opportunities and recommend that they be housed on a centralized webpage and promoted for utilization by managers and staff across the University of California to encourage advancement and promotion from within the University of California. System-wide talent management offers online courses in managing implicit bias and search advisory and hiring committee best practices. The UC Managing Implicit Bias series, a 6-course training series designed to increase awareness of implicit bias and reduce its impact, is available at no cost to all. The Search Advisory and Hiring Committee Best Practices course explores the important roles of committee chairs and members, provides strategies to ensuring an equitable process, and addresses laws and UC policy that govern hiring practices. It's recommended for individuals and committees engaged in search advisory and/or hiring functions. The UC System-Wide People Management Series and Certificate is a program for all people managers consisting of both online courses and in-person learning experiences. Topics of performance management, managing implicit bias, managing people, administration and operations, change management, and communications are covered. The UC Management Skills Assessment Program offers an intensive off-site assessment center experience for early career managers to strengthen engagement and preparation. The program guides participants through a series of structured exercises and simulations observed by trained assessors who offer feedback about observed strengths and development areas. Later, a professional development plan is designed to optimize assessment feedback. The UC Women's Initiative for Professional Development is a system-wide professional development program to support the success and advancement of mid-career women-identified professionals and is open to all employees who support and are committed to this mission. The UC Berkeley Next Opportunity at Work Now conference is designed to support UC staff with career and professional development through inspiring keynote speakers, workshops, community building with peers, and career planning resources. The UCR Staff Conference is a 2-day virtual event created by UCR staff for UC staff, co-hosted by UCR Staff Assembly, Leaders of Excellence and Distinction, and Human Resources Employee and Organizational Development. It is available to all UC staff at no cost. Through collaboration and promotion of existing professional development resources, we can increase opportunities for advancement, promotion, and potential for leadership positions, thus retaining our talented and dedicated University of California staff. Next, I will pass the microphone to my colleague, Nellie, who will focus on our next area of focus.
Thank you, Lucine. So another area that our working group focused on to promote career advancement was career coaching. In our research, we found that less than half of UC locations have one-on-one career coaching available for staff. Our colleagues at UC Berkeley does offer career coaching, and through surveys that they conduct, they report that 77% of respondents felt better equipped to take action in their career development, and 64% of respondents felt better equipped to pursue job opportunities. Therefore, our working group recommendation is that all locations, all UC locations, offer career coaching. If funding is a challenge to this recommendation, a further recommendation is that UC system-wide assist locations by either offering free career coaching through the My UC Career site or by providing funding to locations to fund their own career coaching. Next, my colleague, Agam, will talk about mentorship programs.
Thank you, Nellie. Good morning. My area of focus was mentorship. And one of the key ways to engage and increase employee engagement is by offering mentorship programs at our locations. Most locations have a mentorship program, whether it is centralized, means either it's housed under HR or staff assembly, or a decentralized mentorship program, which is run by smaller units or organizations. To obtain this information, we reached out and solicited some feedback from our CUCSA delegates and their coordinates. Our next slide here will show our best practices and recommendations that we were able to derive from that survey. One of the key things here in having a successful mentorship program would be to offer trainings, set expectations and guidelines for both the mentors and mentees. A speed dating type of form or a matrix will help match the mentors and mentees, and then meet and greet social mixers to encourage networking between both the mentors and mentees was also one of the highlights that most locations sort of agreed on. As far as recommendations are concerned, creating more awareness was something that we were able to sort of elicit out of this survey. It's something that is not readily available, and so marketing, communicating these opportunities for our staff across the system would be fantastic, including posting it on the UCNet website. The good news here is that we have a lot more need for, we have a lot of mentees, and therefore we need a lot of mentors. It was suggested that we offer group mentoring as well as some kind of incentives to encourage mentors to sign up, whether it's gift cards or some sort of incentive. Lastly, we also found that moving the program to a centralized location such as human resources, rather than have it be run by a volunteer staff assembly board, might be a little more effective. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Andrea.
Thank you, Agam. I'm going to speak to career pathways and career tracks. Career tracks is a way to organize job titles so that they're standardized across all locations, with the exception of Berkeley Lab, as well as show a development pathway. So if you're currently a 2 or a 3 and you're looking to move into a supervisor level, it shows a clear pathway to do so. Some locations also offer a career pathway training program, meaning they're looking at staff that are interested in a particular career. So one of those is Berkeley has a fellowship program where you can shadow in another department, another position that you're interested in. Also, UCSF offers a different series of workforce development programs. So say you're interested in being a medical assistant, you can receive training to transition into a medical assistant, or maybe you're interested in being a patient service coordinator. You can get training in healthcare administration to make a transition into that patient service coordinator role. Lastly, Berkeley Lab does offer career pathways specifically for scientists. They are available just to scientists and engineers, though, so not all staff can take advantage of having a clear career pathway at Berkeley Lab. And I will hand it back to Jeremy to speak to partnership with HR.
Thanks. So we're going to wrap up with our recommendations. The first theme is just an overall better partnership with HR from CUCSA in terms of advancement. Local staff assemblies and CUCSA delegates really should have strategic partnerships with their location's HR department. That would include regular meetings, involvement and engagement strategies, and input on supervisory training. This varied location to location. So this is just something we would like to standardize across locations. Also, we'd like local staff assemblies to be involved in the interview and onboarding process for the CHRO across locations. And finally, just really making sure that we are pushing for professional development time for all employees. So supervisors making PPSM 50 professional development a priority for those 80 hours. Also around the lines of staff mobility, if HR can and where they can, we think just speeding up the process for a lot of these things that keep us losing staff. So if you can retain them through speeding up the process for reclassification, promotion, and even granting stipends for those that do extra work, maybe when someone is left behind, when someone leaves, would be really helpful for retaining staff and having consistent timelines for these processes. And then finally, each location, if they can grow examples that we had mentioned and Andrea mentioned of clear advancement pathways within departments so people can see what their future at UC would look like. Things like fellowship programs were said to be very helpful. And we're going to end here with Andrea talking a bit about recommendations for each of the individual areas.
Great, thank you. So just to summarize some of the recommendations that came from our research, first was to ensure that all UC locations provide career coaching. Secondly, we focus on UC system-wide being a resource to UC location mentorship programs by providing support and guidance, especially in those areas of challenges such as how to recruit members. And then we would like to see the career tracks, job descriptions, and job builder tools available to all UC locations. So some locations have the ability to log in and see a specific job description for a career track series. That would be helpful to have at all locations. So if you're looking to explore career in another area and another location, that job description is available for you, but also to review compensation as well. We also recommend that system-wide talent management should facilitate additional integrated talent management strategies in collaboration with location partners to further address shared priorities, leverage best practices, and eliminate redundancies. And lastly, system-wide talent management should make existing professional development resources available to all UC staff on a centralized web page. And with that, I will open up the floor to questions from the delegation.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Thacker from UC Irvine, second year delegate. On one of your slides, you mentioned trying to have more consistent timelines for things like reclassifications, promotions, stipends. At Irvine, that's definitely something that I've experienced just in my work, that it's really hard to tell how long it's going to be, which makes it hard to set expectations with employees, makes it harder to guarantee that people will have steady trajectories on the paths that they're on. I'm wondering if in your work with the campus CHROs, you got any feedback about what some of the roadblocks to that might be, and if there are ways that CUCSA can potentially help to sort things out and make that more consistent across the system.
I can speak to just talking at UC Berkeley with Eugene, our CHRO. So from talking to him, he made it sound like, hey, like it shouldn't take as long as it does. That comes down to individual departments. Like, you know, as centralized HR, these aren't as complex as like people are making out to be. Whereas I heard from other conversations, it was just more like, oh no, it just takes a while. So that is something we ran into as well. There was just inconsistency, I think, from the different CHROs in terms of their response with like how long it should take, whether or not it's a centralized problem, quote unquote, or more the departments really not being consistent. And so that lack, I think we need to kind of have, when the CHROs meet and stuff, it be a little bit more clear on what the processes are. Because like we did hear kind of different things, I think, when talking to the CHROs. In my individual location, it was like, oh, it shouldn't be a problem. And then other ones were like clearly like, it's a problem. So yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, if there's trouble getting clarity about what even the process is at different locations, that seems to me like it might be a good starting point.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that was mentioned as well is getting started in your own department on that job description, because HR is not necessarily the best one to be able to assist you with the particular job that you're recruiting for. So as soon as you know, a position becomes available, kickstarting off that process within your own department can help facilitate getting that back to HR sooner.
Great. So thank you to, one second here. Thank you to our presenters, Jeremy, Lucine, Nellie, Agam, and Dre. Next up, I'd like to call the Total Compensation Work Group and Nathan McCall.
Thank you very much, John. All right, I'll start off by introducing our small but mighty team. We have Erica Leon from Riverside, Anna Esquivel, who could not be here today, Nicola Gruen, who could not be here today from Office of the President, and Teresa Short from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So I want to talk this morning about scope and a starting point and suggestions. So our charge was to answer the question, how can our current compensation model be refined and enhanced to help retain UC staff? That's a huge question to answer, and that would be almost impossible to definitively answer within 1 year. The good news is we don't have to answer within 1 year. As Dennis mentioned, the structure of the work groups has changed such that this will be a multi-year approach. And so we wanted to make sure to start well by starting up with a foundation of awareness around what is and potentially what could be. So we've all been asked to, fly a plane while trying to build the plane in different projects around the UC. Think of this as trying to build the airport before being asked to build the plane. That was our goal. So that leads us to our starting point. Knowing that we had years to build on, we set out to create the raising awareness at many levels of the organization, from the regions down to the individual level. And it was really great. Much like Jeremy's group mentioned the Cora report, we read through some of the past CUCSA delegations' work on these very topics because this is a perennial issue, and we found stuff from a long time ago and subsequently throughout. So anyway, we used that report and we tried to figure out how we can leverage that in our current work. And I want to say thank you to everyone who is online as a CUCSA alumni for doing that work. It really helped us to focus on a new effort instead of having to reinvent the wheel. So at the end, we'll be offering suggestions for each of our areas that we focused on, and then also asking for suggestions from the delegates in the room, and then in the Q&A session at the end, asking for suggestions from folks online. So what we did was we focused on 4 areas of effort. We wanted to deliver a UC-wide total compensation matrix, which would be aimed at raising awareness at the local staff assembly level. We wanted to conduct or then take that specific focus areas of staff housing and dependent tuition assistance, which could inform CUCSA of how to advocate more effectively in the future. We wanted to conduct a compensation benefits survey, which would then raise awareness of the system-wide HR at our colleagues there. And then also create an understanding your compensation situation tool, which would raise awareness at the individual level and also at the regental level. So to kick us off and talk about that first one of those will be Teresa.
Thank you, Nathan. Total compensation encompasses all benefits, monetary and non-monetary. I compiled the UC-wide compensation matrix to provide a one-stop glance of each of the campuses with their corresponding benefits. The matrix provides quick links for distinction between each location. The matrix can be used as a tool to raise awareness and by the staff assemblies to share with their stakeholders. Accessing the website of each location provides valuable information and an opportunity to analyze the various benefits within the UC system. Who wants 100% tuition reimbursement? This is one of the facts that can be found by accessing the UC-wide compensation matrix. Most campus benefits are similar, but a few locations offer enhanced websites and additional resources. The majority of the campuses have the same UC system-wide website links, and a few have enhanced non-monetary benefits. One of them is UC San Francisco, which offers a sustainability discount, and San Diego, they offer the Triton Commuter Club. The work group identified tuition reimbursement for dependents and housing as benefits that could be further explored. Housing is a very limited resource and could attract and retain employees for long-term commitments, as well as can be used as a recruitment tool. We suggest further exploration of both topics and maintaining the matrix with updated information so that it can be used further. And I'll turn this over to Erica.
Thank you, Teresa. And as Teresa mentioned, one of the areas that we'd like to see further growth is staff housing and dependent tuition assistance. So our original goal was to really assess what we have available now for our staff and also identify what our CUCSA delegates would like to see more of in the future. So with the creation of the compensation matrix that Teresa put a lot of work into, as well as our group, we did identify that there were some shortcomings in these two areas. What we did was create a survey for all of our CUCSA delegates to inform us on what's available at their current campus and let us know really what they'd like to see if we were given a blank slate to do whatever we would like to moving forward in these two benefits. So our recommendations for next steps is to pull all of the information we received in these surveys, provide them to future CUCSA delegates, and to continue to use these tools and information to advocate on our own campuses for these two benefits that are incredibly important. So for staff housing, what our current state reported through our survey was there was submarket housing available for rent purchase and transitional housing at some campuses. Primarily, these housing options are available for faculty, but staff do have an option when there is availability. Employees are eligible for mortgage assistance through a company called Landed. What we did find out was that Landed is currently waitlisted, so unfortunately that's not a current option for us. And overall, the majority of campuses we heard from either do not offer these benefits or offer minimal benefits for housing. So our desired future state, what we'd like to see is to make the same faculty loan program that's available also available to our staff. We'd like to see home loans for staff at submarket rates. We'd like to see we'd like UC to provide down payment assistance or shared equity options for first-time home buyers at our campuses. And we'd like to focus housing efforts from a reasonable distance from each UC location. Moving forward to dependent tuition assistance, what we found is our current state is dependent tuition assistance does not exist, but is highly recommended. We also recently found that our own John Bodenschatz is on a system-wide committee that's going to be focusing on these options for dependent tuition assistance, which we are very encouraged about. We have provided our survey results to John, which will be shared with the committee as they continue with their work. We also found in our current state there was overwhelming feedback that dependent tuition assistance can help with recruitment, retention, and financial stability. In addition, a lot of the feedback we received on our survey did indicate that there was a need and a want for greater staff support for tuition assistance for staff themselves, which we'll talk a little bit about. Our desired future state, we would love to see a dependent tuition assistance for full or partial assistance for dependents of any staff at any UC campus. We'd like to see comparable benefits to comparator organizations around us. For staff tuition assistance, we'd love to see university extension course fees waived, a graduated system of reimbursement based on the years of qualified service and active employment, and provide comparable benefits to our comparator organizations around us. And we have compiled a list of what is available at these comparator organizations. They will be included in our final report if you'd like to see. They include several campuses such as USC, Cal State's, most of our competitors. So it's very eye-opening to see what's available. So finally, our suggestions for moving forward. We would like to structure all data from the survey similar to the UC-wide total compensation matrix, which we shared with you earlier. And we'd like CUCSA to form a specific ask for advocacy, such as shared equity, MOP loan for staff, give staff equal opportunity as academic employees, and have a graduated system of reimbursement based on years of service. Thank you, and I will pass this on to Nathan.
Thanks, Erica. All right. A quick word about the compensation benefit survey. And that is, the goal was to gain an understanding of employee sentiment regarding the current benefits that are offered. And when we started doing this work and thinking about what it should be and how it would work, once we got an idea for that, we then went to our colleagues at System-Wide HR, Jay and Missy, to say, hey, we've got this great idea. And they said, we're already doing that. And so we said, great, let's play well with others and not duplicate effort. So we asked for them we asked for a seat at the table to partner with them in the construction of the questions, and then of course in the publication and promotion of that survey when the time comes. So naturally, the suggestions are, we're going to follow up for the next year's delegation, follow up in August with the system-wide HR, and then partner with them to compose the questions and use the results for relevant advocacy. So that was the third effort, and now I'm going to switch to the fourth effort, which was the understanding your compensation situation. That was what was aimed at the individual and the regental level. So how do you get the Regent's attention? As I mentioned before, I read through the work that had been done by past CUCSA delegations, and their work was quality, it was accurate, and it was aimed at the Regents. Yet this is still an issue. If we want to move the needle, we'll need to try a new approach with the same data. So the Regents have told us that setting a system-wide trend into a personal context sparks effective conversations behind closed doors. So rather than CUCSA speaking to the Regents like an aggregated voice of the people, we could instead disaggregate our voice into a chorus of people that can then approach the Regents. So our goal was to equip employees with clear and specific data that could be used for appropriate advocating at the regental level during public comments. So again, we consulted with Jay for the approach, the tone, what's the most appropriate way to move forward. We also consulted with UCOP, the head of IT, Molly Greek, to see what systems were available. And what we landed on was a live web page, which you can go to currently on the CUCSA website, which is an employee-centric, system-wide place where people can understand their compensation situation. And it was important to have it in a neutral place like the CUCSA website, because some folks, hard to believe, they don't have a positive opinion of HR. And so if it's on the HR website, well, maybe that's not the full answer. But if it's on the CUCSA website, you can know that's the full answer because we're not, there's no reason to believe that we would be hiding anything. So this is one tool for two outcomes. The employees will either build understanding by going through this tool, and then they'll realize, hey, I'm better off than I thought I was. How great. No need for advocacy. Or they'll go through the tool to build understanding, and then we'll help them visualize advocacy. So the questions, some of the questions we answer on the website are, what is total compensation? How can I find the market rate for my classification? Should I be paid at the market rate? You know, general philosophies around those. And of course, how do I compare to the market rate? We show them what the total compensation calculator is and how it works, so that they can see the full benefit of their compensation package at UC. And then also we help them hurdle the barrier of math by providing a calculator that gives the two most common compensation related calculations that are needed in order to have an appropriate conversation. If advocacy is warranted, then we walk them through the process of what is public comment? How does it work? Where do I go? What should I say? And that's all listed with examples and links to the appropriate information in order to help them move forward. So the suggestions, of course, are to publicize this tool broadly, both at the CUCSA level and at the local levels to get people using the tool, to highlight the number of people who do use the tool, so that will further publicize the tool. In the future, we can add modules such as a cost of housing section linking to federal and state data, and consider and the CUCSA delegation will have to consider whether to include a geodifferential table for cross-location comparison. So again, we had the four efforts. The UC Total Wide Compensation Matrix was completed. The Staff Housing Independent Tuition Assistance is in its final stage. The Compensation Benefit Survey was deferred to next year, and the Understanding Your Compensation Situation is completed. So our call to action for you is, if you have good suggestions that should be added to our own suggestions, we'd like to hear it from you. And to all of our CHROs on the call and people in other cohorts, if you can think of a way that CUCSA can partner with your cohort to spread this message and increase raising awareness, we'd like to hear from you. With that, I'll hand it over for questions. Any questions from the delegation?
Hi, Joe McNess. I'm one of the staff advisors to the Regents. Thanks so much for having me here. So I just wanted to say that I think that your comments have been quite compelling as we sit at the Regent table. And I would encourage you all, if you haven't done already, to continue this approach. I think it takes multiple cycles, multiple meetings in order for your message to be heard. And so I think it's a great start, and I look forward to hearing from more staff as they share their specific compensation situation. And then I had a question, since Jay is sitting right next door to me, and it seems like he kind of helped you out with one of your efforts. I was wondering if we could get a quick update from Jay on how we're doing with the benefit survey and where it's headed.
Real quick answer. We're in the process of actually going through the RFP process. So we're writing up the RFP so that we can actually go ahead, get a consultant in. That way we can really start the work of defining the questions, how it's going to work, and all those kinds of things. So we're still early, but the effort is definitively moving on, along with a couple other things. Total remuneration study is also part of that effort, as well as trying to create another study for wow, I can't remember the wording. What's the wording? Engagement survey too. So we're doing all three of those, and we're in the RFP process.
So I will say thank you, Joe, for that affirmation. Yes, the goal is to use this tool to do exactly what you're saying. And it is because of previous staff advisors to the regions, other regions, and comments like yours that prompted a lot of this work. Also, a shout out to Jay for being so helpful. And a quick to my colleague at UC Santa Cruz, Karen Schloss, for helping me make sure I didn't tell any lies on the Understanding Your Total Compensation website. So thank you. Next question.
I'm Jeremy Thacker, UC Irvine, second year delegate. Like Joe, I have a comment and a question. Comment, the compensation situation calculator is brilliant. I really hope that tool is able to empower people to advocate on their own behalf, and I'd love to see more things like that out there. For the question, for the benefits survey, if a comprehensive inventory doesn't already exist, a survey is a brilliant idea. Glad that's going to be going ahead. But I am curious, who would be the recipients of the survey? So is that something that goes to like locations HR units, or is it something that goes to individuals? And who would be the recipients and beneficiaries of that information? What would potential next steps from that inventory be?
Yeah, so the original thought was for CUCSA to put on the survey. It would go to just your average, regular, everyday employee. And then we would be the recipients of the data. The beneficiaries would be the CUCSA delegation, who can then advocate effectively with system-wide HR. However, learning that there's a system-wide effort, we're going to be, it's really important to partner well. So whatever the goals of the system-wide HR end up being, that's what we're going to want to partner with for as far as we can. And so everything we've heard so far looks like it's going to work out really well. So that's a long way to say we had an original intent, and now TBD, playing well with others.
Just got the mic again. The intent is to do it for faculty, staff, and possibly retirees. The staff is, we want to do all staff, but there may be additional bargaining or something we have to do to actually be able to go to represented staff. But the intent is all of those groups plus retirees, because they all are actually beneficiaries of our benefits program. So the whole process is really, let's get the feedback, let's get the information from our entire population, and then we can actually understand if or what or how we should be making changes to our benefits program so that all of the UC community is actually the beneficiaries of the whole study.
And with that, I'll hand it back to John.
I want to thank Nathan, Teresa, and Erica for sharing with us. I want to welcome up the Wellness and Staff Experience Work Group and Shara Minard.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm Shara Minard, UC Santa Barbara Work-Life Resources and second year delegate. And I am joined by my colleagues, Desiree Hennon from UC San Diego, Greta Carlalay from UC Santa Barbara, Kaylee Hayakawa from UC Irvine, and Courtney Klein from UC Berkeley. And we also wanted to send a congratulations to Vanity Campbell on her new position at UCOP. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us today, but we think
thank her for her significant contributions to this work group. As a content note, this presentation will highlight mental health concerns, including death by suicide. So our UC workplaces play a significant role in our lives, impacting employee health and wellness. And we have defined employee health and wellness as a foundation of our work group efforts. Over the years, the research and workplace definitions of wellness and well-being has expanded. And for the purposes of this work group, we're referencing the U.S. Surgeon General's 2022 report, which creates a comprehensive and holistic framework that integrates the dimensions of well-being and centers employee voice and equity by creating the conditions for physical and psychological safety, fostering positive social interactions and relationships in the workplace that support worker well-being, harmonizing work and non-work demands, prioritizing dignity and meeting, and growing opportunities for workers to accomplish goals based on their skills and abilities. The framework and well-being definition that we have here are also consistent with prior CUCSA work group reports related to employee wellness. And with that, I'll pass it to Desiree.
It's gonna go there. Employees face different challenges that affect the 5 key dimensions of employee well-being, included but not limited to occupational factors, personal characteristics of the individual, socioeconomic, political, and cultural factors, health challenges, economic, food and housing insecurity, and personal and household financial factors. Our charge: employee retention has proven challenging for both public and private sector, particularly after what is referred to as the Great Resignation. UC system-wide has more than 5,200 vacancies with serious implications for UC. Our charge this year was to create a framework for addressing employee retention through the lens of wellness and the staff experience, and further charged with identifying local and system-wide resources for employees and supervisors to use. Our vision is that the University of California is the workplace of choice for both Californians and the nation, prioritizing equitable workforce engagement and an organizational culture that positions the employees to thrive towards a more resilient, diverse, and competitive California. And I will pass it to Greta.
Thank you. So to investigate this issue, we looked at previous CUCSA work group reports and the results of the last state staff engagement survey. We got feedback from subject matter experts, and we looked at current research on the topic of employee well-being. But most importantly, we asked our staff to tell their stories of overwork and burnout through impact testimonials so that we could receive a more comprehensive picture of employee concerns. In 2015, the UC agreed to increase student enrollment. And so as the student numbers grew, faculty growth was the focus. But unfortunately, staff numbers did not grow at the same pace. This resulted in inadequate staff numbers prior to the pandemic. There was pride in campuses being able to function with lean staff numbers. And it worked because many staff were willing to go the extra mile because they believed in the mission of the university and they wanted to support students and faculty. The impact of the pandemic and the Great Resignation, as we know, has resulted in significant staff vacancies and campuses struggle to fill them. So if we take a look at this chart, since 2016, at the 9 UC locations that have undergraduate populations, student growth has been 10.7%. Faculty growth, 11.43%. However, PSS staff has actually decreased by 7.73%. There is a large increase in MSP staff, but it should be noted that these staff numbers collectively are about 46,000 employees, and only 15% of them are MSP. So the large majority of our staff are PSS, and these non-managerial staff positions are really the ones that are heavily impacted by the turnover that we're experiencing. Staff remaining are struggling to keep up with the workload, as we can see in these examples of the testimonials from the survey. And to quote one of them, quote, "Until salaries are enough to rent and buy houses near UC campuses, high turnover and the eventual burnout of those who remain will persist. This is a systemic problem. The 5,000 vacant jobs aren't the result of the Great Resignation. They are a result of UC not investing in staff, end quote. Burnout has affected health and well-being. Compounded with the increased cost of living outpacing salary increases, staff no longer see a reason to commit extra energy to their jobs. In the impact surveys, we see a theme that staff are saying they want to do a good job, but they want to do a good job in the job they were hired to do, and they simply can't because they're spread too thin. It's concerning to us that the UC 2030, UC's multi-year framework, includes goals of increased degree attainment, increased retention rates for first-generation students, and increase in faculty. And we have heard the numbers 20,000 new undergraduates and 1,000 new faculty in the next decade. These are admirable goals, but what is noticeably absent is the discussion of staff growth. Staff are critical for the student and faculty success. Our current crisis of staff shortages and extreme burnout is only going to be exacerbated if a proportional staff growth with concrete numbers doesn't become part of that plan. So we're not trying to be over dramatic in this discussion of burnout, but we want to emphasize the seriousness of the situation that we're in. Karoshi, which can be translated into overwork death, is a Japanese term relating to occupational related sudden death. And this epidemic came to light in the 60s in Japan, when it was recognized that employees cannot work 12 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, year after year, without suffering physically as well as mentally. It was recognized that chronic stress disrupts our mental health and leads us to adopt harmful habits in order to cope. These include smoking, drinking, impaired sleep, not exercising, not socializing, and so on. And our staff are telling us they're experiencing these things. Over time, these habits wear down the body and increase cardiovascular risk factors, leading to stroke and heart disease, and in extreme cases, death by suicide. We need to change the messaging that comes from our senior administration that lean and mean is a good thing. We need to ask our senior administrators to stop normalizing overwork. We would like to change the culture that has an attitude of acceptance that we're all suffering and it's business as usual. This message further demoralizes staff. We want to recruit allies to amplify our voices that our current situation is not sustainable. And for those that have the power of change, prioritize staff.
Thank you. Our managers and supervisors are a huge part of this greater conversation around wellness, as folks who both experience high levels of stress and pressure themselves and can quote unquote make or break the experience and wellness of their employees. We've centered on reasonable workloads as a way to promote the wellness of our staff and the sustainability of the important work that we all do for the UC. A reasonable workload can help mitigate stress, burnout, and depression. And our location culture, our staffing, and our managers and supervisors have huge influences on this. Our 3 recommendations as it relates to our managers and supervisors are first, to help them develop crucial skills around advocacy, intervention, and leadership through evidence-based training, guidelines, and recommendations. We want our managers and supervisors to have the tools and feel empowered to identify the signs and symptoms of burnout in their staff, to advocate for their and their staff's needs, to foster psychologically safe working environments, and to design positions around reasonable workloads that might require negotiation between the demands that are placed on them by their location and the wellness of the employee. Our second recommendation is to build accountability and the promotion of the imperative nature of wellness in the staff experience through the incorporation of wellness-related responsibilities in manager and supervisor position descriptions. If we understand that the wellness of our staff is a shared responsibility and that the workplace is a key element of wellness, then we need to build accountability and responsibility into our organization. One way we can do this is by making it part of our managers and supervisors' jobs. Provide our managers and supervisors with the room to integrate this cultivation of a healthy work environment into their day-to-day work. Employee wellness isn't just on the shoulders of our very hardworking wellness managers, but on all of us. And our last recommendation in this area is to promote mindset and social norm shifts through the intentional implementation of social norms campaigns and modeling by all levels of leadership. Our leaders have to embody and tangibly implement these values as it not only fosters institutional change, but demonstrates to staff that they are safe and have not just literal, but social permission to do things like take their lunch away from their desk, use their vacation, and engage in the incredible wellness programming that is offered at each of our locations.
Those are some recommendations that we can implement at the local level. And now this is what we can do at the system-wide level to support staff wellness. Currently, there is a disconnect between the location wellness managers, Healthy Campus Network, and the Office of the President, with no system-wide direction, and that makes it hard to roll out or have campus support of wellness programs. Therefore, we are advocating for a director of system-wide employee well-being to help provide the direction, advocate for the locations to implement programs, and advocate for funding, as well as support UC locations in achieving the minimum standard guidelines. There has been a rising trend of this position in other higher educations. Universities such as Ohio State, University of Michigan, and University of Colorado have already implemented a similar role. A director of system-wide employee well-being at the OP level would help bring leadership and oversight to a staffing and burnout issue that impacts all UC locations. And as we know, this role at OP can only make suggestions. Therefore, there would need to be a directive from the president to all UC locations, encouraging them to support the efforts already in place.
There are a few programs currently implemented across locations that could benefit from a director of system-wide employee well-being for cross-location collaboration and for system-wide guidelines and guidance. The first of these is the Wellness Ambassador Program. Multiple locations currently have ambassador programs of varying degrees of success and size. Wellness ambassadors are a coordinated group of volunteers dedicated to making the workplace healthier. In partnership with our campus wellness managers and coordinators, ambassadors help to expand the reach in promoting UC-wide and local location initiatives. Healthy department certifications are another example of a successful wellness program. Similar to the ambassadors, certified departments expand the reach of the wellness managers and coordinators. Departments can also serve as examples and mentors to other groups as models of health and well-being. The program can also be coordinated with the existing ambassador programs, using ambassadors as coaches and certifiers for these programs.
Okay, so our final recommendation today is advocating for a healthy university. Through the Okanagan Charter, we can embed health into all aspects of campus culture, across the administration, operations, and academic mandates, and lead health promotion action and collaboration, both locally and globally. The Okanagan Charter is an international charter for health promoting universities and colleges and was an outcome of the 2015 International Conference on Health Promoting Universities and brings all of our recommendations together under one call to action. It really calls on those post-secondary schools to embed health, again, into all aspects of campus culture. And some of you may have seen UC Irvine's celebration of the Okanagan Charter adoption and their plans for the initiative. Berkeley and Los Angeles have also signed on to the charter, and several other locations are in progress. For the Okanagan Charter to be fully effective, we recommend full adaptation at the president's level, with each campus signing on as well. So like I said, there are two calls to action here. The first is to embed health into all aspects of campus culture across the administration by embedding health in all campus policies, creating these supportive campus environments, generating thriving communities and a culture of well-being, supporting personal development, and creating or reorienting campus services to design campus services to support equitable access, enhance health and well-being, optimize human and ecosystem potential, and promote a supportive organizational culture. And the second call to action would be to lead health promotion action and collaboration, both locally and globally. So finally, to summarize our recommendations, we need hiring goals for staff that are on par with student and faculty growth numbers. Lean and mean is not the answer. Rather, we need to change the message on overwork and burnout. We need funding for at least one wellness manager and a programming budget for each campus and location. We need to build accountability and critical skills for managers and supervisors through evidence-based training, guidelines, and leadership. And we need a director of system-wide employee well-being within the office of the president, serving all UC employees. And finally, adaptation of the Okanagan Charter as a directive from the president to the campuses to sign on to be a health promoting university. We thank you for your time and look forward to your questions and engagement on this topic. Thank you.
Now we'll open it up to questions locally.
Roberta Camarena, UC San Diego. Thank you so much for all of the work and effort you put into this presentation. And I saw all your action items that you listed on there, and I'd like to know what your number one priority, if there's anything that this institution needs to do today, what is that?
I think the big one is to changing the message on overwork. I think that's from top down, we can change the message. And by that, we need to, and by doing so, we must also increase hiring goals. So I think those are kind of our two main concerns.
Dennis McIver, Chair, UCOP. My question is, I recently saw that I think Howard University offered a day off for their entire university, citing burnout and wellness. And as a committee, I wonder what your response would be if something like that were proposed within UC.
I think that's an incredible idea. Other organizations and institutions have done that with incredible results. I think one of the benefits to doing something like that is then there is no then buildup of emails over time, at least between staff members, right? There is no midnight emails being sent. So I think, yes, that's a really good option for bringing it all, giving everyone some rest without the pressure.
Nathan McCall, UC Santa Cruz. I know in my advocacy work with different people at system-wide HR, our local campus leadership, and even across to other campuses, sometimes the wording of such a message that you're recommending is difficult to imagine what isn't going to land people in legal hot water, in contractual hot water, yada, yada. So does this work group either have a plan to, or to recommend for next year's work group to create a vetted message that can then be disseminated to the locations that they would be able to utilize in their own local spheres, similar to how last year in June, Chancellor Christ at Berkeley said, work like the CUCSA work and your local staff assembly work is not volunteer work, that's legitimate work. And then several other chancellors, including our own chancellor, Cindy Labrie at UC Santa Cruz, she has sent out a similar message, but the language is always hard. So do you recommend, or do you have plans to create some language to disseminate?
I have just gotten the warning sign that we are out of time. So what I will say is, yes, I think we need to continue that work and offering messages of opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
I want to thank Wellness and Staff Experience for sharing their work with us. And last but definitely not least, I'm going to call up our strategic plan work group and Jeremy Thacker.
All right. Good morning. I am pleased to introduce my exceptional work group. Ian Cook from UC Merced, Lauren McDermott from UC Davis. There's also Koban Kochai, who's from UC Davis Health. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us this morning, but she put a tremendous amount of effort into this, as did the rest of our work group. So I want to make sure that she gets recognition for the excellent work that she contributed as well. So over the course of the next few minutes, we're pleased to share with you the ongoing work that's happening towards CUCSA's strategic plan. We're going to start by introducing our process, what we've been using and are still using to get it across the finish line. The meat of today's presentation is going to be about the goals that we're recommending for the strategic plan and their associated objectives, measures, and strategies. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. We are pretty close to done, but there are a few things yet to do. So we'll talk about what those are. So with that, I'm pleased to hand it off to Ian, who will tell you about our process.
Thank you, Jeremy. So putting together a strategic plan is a lot of work. And as you can see up here, we had many steps trying to complete this process, and highlighted in yellow, we are at the review and revise stage at this point. But we did have a lot of steps prior to this, including readiness assessment, which is really important when planning a group like this. We need to make sure people have capacity and breadth. We went from meeting once a month to meeting every 2 weeks to meeting once a week, right, as it came down to it. So really making sure that everyone has the bandwidth to participate. Then also went on to identify stakeholders, which are just folks that are really integrated into the CUCSA process and our partners at UCLP and in HR. And then, let me just move on to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit more about, oops, did I hit the wrong one? Thanks. So our stakeholders and data gathering, this is a really interesting step in the process of strategic planning. Our work group, the three of us plus Koban, who's missing today, identified some individuals, like I said previously, so CUCSA leadership, current delegates, past chairs, and we put together a set of 5 different, collaboration points. So we did one-on-ones, we did focus groups, feedback surveys, and also town halls. So those yellow or those green check marks that you see here are all events that we took care of and did the process, and the yellowed or the grayed out check marks are things that were offered but not necessarily completed. Right here. Oh my gosh. Strategic issue identification. This was a rough situation. We had about 77 needs and suggestions coming through from all aspects of CUCSA and our partners. It took us quite a few weeks to whittle this down to about 16 strategic issues that we're going to actually go ahead and move forward with. Some of those are ensuring that non-represented staff voices are at the table in policy and at key hiring decisions. And then also cross-pollination and promotion of the successes and best practices of CUCSA. So when we started prioritizing our strategic issues, we kind of put together 3 or 4 different aspects. First, we started with a priority survey, collecting information such as demographic information, ranking of the 16 issues that we had identified in the previous slide, and then adding opportunity for folks to add their insight. We put together a word cloud, which kind of had things stand out for us, what people were really looking for out of this strategic plan and what we should do to move forward as a group. And when finally we ended up with a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, before putting together the entire plan at the end. Drafting, this is something that we had just finished, and as you can see, the work group, we did key issues, goals, revisions, but there was also a checks and balance and review for each of the steps that we provided. And so as you can see in yellow, we're right there at the revision process and drafting, and then hopefully we'll move to adoption into the summer. And now we'll pass it over to Jeremy to talk about goals.
All right. So the vast majority of time on this process was spent connecting with the people we work with, not just within CUCSA, but beyond CUCSA. So that brought us to a point where we were able to roll together all of that feedback, all the prioritization, and come up with this set of 3 goals that we feel, based on our analysis, will take us the furthest in terms of evolving and maturing our organization. Goal 1, solidify and enhance CUCSA's identity as the UCLY partner for non-represented staff advocacy. Goal 2, improve organizational continuity and support to increase effectiveness and capability. And goal 3, strengthen partnerships to increase influence and inclusion. One overarching thing I'd like to point out is that while advocacy is core to what CUCSA does, these do not represent specific issues. We work, regularly with things like staff compensation and housing and time and place work flexibility, but those kinds of needs are going to change over time. So this plan is really designed to focus on what are the things that we do, regardless of what the topic of the day is, that will make us more successful in those advocacy efforts. We're going to talk a little bit more about each one of these goals. For each one in the full document, there's a goal, an associated narrative that frames what we mean by that goal, how it's to be interpreted, specific objectives that you can think of like sub-goals, smaller, more accomplishable things to take on that will advance the greater goal, measures, which are things that we can look at to understand whether we're making progress, and then suggested strategies. The word suggested there is important because situations are going to change over time. We don't really want to, paint our CUCSA leadership into a corner in future years. So these are things that we think are actionable, but it'll be up to future leaders to look at these strategies and also the measures to figure out what is actually implementable, what makes sense. And there may be new opportunities that present themselves that would advance these goals. And we definitely encourage our future leaders to take those up as they present themselves. So with that, let's take a look at goal number 1. Solidify and enhance CUCSA's identity as the UC-wide partner for non-represented staff advocacy. This really revolves around identity. As we were meeting with people, we got a lot of different impressions of what it is that CUCSA is and should be. And we believe that by solidifying what CUCSA is for ourselves and for others, it'll make us a more effective and focused organization. Internally, it'll give us a better sense of how we should be conducting ourselves, what kinds of things we should be focusing on. And externally, it'll help give people a sense of how best to work with us. We are distinct from unions in that we don't have collective bargaining power. And by virtue of that, the ways that we interface and engage will fundamentally be different. We need to understand those differences, and our partners need to understand those differences in order to work effectively with us. But by integrating it into our identity, we can really internalize that and lean into it. The other element of this is advocacy for non-represented staff. CUCSA will always advocate for all staff, but we have a particular duty to non-represented staff in our mission. And we need to acknowledge that in order to position ourselves so that we are in the room where it happens when issues that are relevant to non-represented staff come up. So we will always care for all staff, but that is a particular area of responsibility that we feel it's important to really internalize. All of these objectives are focused on advancing this identity both internally and externally. We also have, and there are many more strategies and measures than this in the actual document, what we'll talk about later. So just so you know, this is just a preview for lack of time. But all these revolve around how is it that we can conduct ourselves, perform activities that will both help to firmly establish and then reinforce that identity with ourselves and with others. Measures of this reflect the kinds of engagements that we're doing that show that people have an understanding of what we're about. Things like messaging and public comment, surveys around perception, that sort of thing. So I'm happy to hand it off now to Lauren, who will take us through the next 2 goals.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. So goal 2 is improve organizational continuity and support to increase effectiveness and capability. As an organization composed of staff who volunteer for 2-year terms, this goal looks at how we can maximize the effectiveness of current delegation, build on the work that has been done previously, and create accountability while retaining that benefit of having the rotating delegation, those rotating point of views and voices. Our objectives focus on improving continuity through follow-through to build on past efforts, as well as improving delegate onboarding. We heard a lot from various folks. It takes a little bit of time as you jump into the delegation to find your feet. And so we're looking at improving, and steps have already been taken towards this with a new delegate description, which has been greatly helpful. And so more items like that to improve their effectiveness while they're here.
And we also are looking at maximizing the percentage of delegate time spent on high value and issue-oriented work. We found just in this work group alone, we spent so much time just scheduling meetings and things like that. And so how could we maybe even look into opportunities for funding for an FTE or creating possible positions within the organization that might help with some of those administrative tasks that take time away from our short time here to focus on these issue-oriented works. So as we look at sample strategies and sample measures here, an item to think about doing is an annual review of planning and assessment in the summer. That includes the possibly current delegation, alumni leadership, taking a look at what we've done and kind of measuring markers and tracking, and that might keep us on track on moving forward those thematic issues we've been taking a look at, as well as on here is more about that first year delegate onboarding, and as well as clarifying the role of the second year delegate to act as a mentor and really make sure there's an understanding on what the two roles are. So as we go into goal 3, it's strengthen partnerships to increase influence and inclusion. I think this goal less so is not just an inward facing goal like the second, but it's both external and internal and is a really core part of who we are as a organization. I think we've heard from every single work group how partnership is a key piece to getting and moving forward their work. And from these conversations with our various stakeholders, we can then have the ability to serve as a well-informed advocate and make effective policy and decision-making recommendations. We also feel like having these relationships with these groups allows us to influence, but it also provides perspective and informs our work as well. So as we look at these objectives, it's a different kind of in bold is the list of partners we really focused on, so improving collaboration with our local staff assemblies, increasing access and influence with local leadership. This we're looking at as our chancellors, our CHROs, those local leaders on each location, improving transparency and coordination with our UCOP HR partners, leveraging our alumni delegates as well. I think this is an area that there was a lot of growth opportunity in. And then leveraging existing UC infrastructure, such as UCOP state governmental relations, to coordinate and align efforts as it's related to governmental advocacy. So as we look at sample strategies here, it's raising awareness of CUCSA and opportunities for partnership. We saw some of that in, cooperation on the benefits survey and items like that. Providing useful reference materials about CUCSA, identities and activities. And so this kind of takes a look at summarizing some of the work we're doing and putting it into perspective for our local staff assemblies and creating opportunities for cross-pollination. And I'm going to hand it back to Jeremy.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, so what we've been talking about today is a near final version of the strategic plan. That said, this is the widest audience that we have shared it with thus far. And we really want to make sure that this is something that we can be proud of, that represents what CUCSA wants to be, but also represents something that our stakeholders can relate to and can glom on to really be a strong partner. As you saw throughout, partnership is going to be so important. So we will want to receive feedback even about this presentation because this is not yet chiseled in stone. More on that in just a moment. But other next steps, once we've gotten that feedback, will be to build out a complete strategic plan document. That'll include information that we shared about process, how we got here, but also details about a vision of the future, which will be a depiction of what the organization might look like if we complete all of these, something to really inspire, and then a monitoring and evaluation plan that will help with implementation and future revision. Lastly, we'll come to adoption of the plan. Originally, we thought that we might want to have some sort of a vote at this meeting, but we ultimately decided that sharing it to this broad audience and getting that feedback was the top priority. So what we're recommending is that once we finalize the document, which is expected to be at the end of July, our chair, who at the time will be John, go ahead and adopt the document. We bring it in because we feel like we have strong buy-in on this. That said, if folks feel like it would be better to have something over the course of the summer, have a vote at the next session, we're open to those kinds of ideas. So whatever would help CUCSA to best embrace this plan, we're happy to talk and get behind that. So more on that after this session. And then lastly, going into next year, we'll be looking at how we go about implementing it. That'll be the operations officer and the chair primarily talking about how do we integrate it into the workings of CUCSA, not just next year, but in the future. And we recommend as a work group creating or assigning a role that's specifically responsible. So lastly, there is a full document that has all of this laid out, including the measures and suggested strategies that we didn't get to during the presentation, and the full written narratives. We encourage you to follow this QR code to go and take a look at it, provide feedback via very simple forms like one question, but that'll help us to put the finishing touches on this. So if you have tweaks or any major concerns, please let us know. We want to hear you. And if you could respond by June 26th, that would be great. That makes sure that we've given folks time to respond, and then we can proceed from there. So with that, we're happy to take any questions. Nathan.
Thanks very much. This is really great. I appreciate the clarity and the flexibility of the work that you've compiled. And I also appreciate seeing some of the comments that I know I've made and other people have made reflected that shows listening. So thank you very much. My question is this. You mentioned part of goal number 1 was becoming the partner for non-represented staff advocacy. For next year, do you recommend CUCSA seek acknowledgement of that the partner status from UCOP or the regents via a charter? If no, what do you recommend for helping other bodies to recognize CUCSA as the partner that we are?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, very insightful. I think that this is technically a question for our future leadership because it will ultimately be up to them to implement it. My personal take from the work that we've done is that it already is recognized. If you look at our original charter and mission, it's kind of baked into it, but it's something where I think we've had to straddle a line for so long as far as what is our role in trying to maintain our partnerships, where do we position ourselves, that it's become muddled. So I think it's really going to be about establishing for ourselves what do we believe we are, and then allowing that to radiate out and have other people also accept us for that thing. We have to be intentional about it, but I think that's going to go farther than any sort of official, acknowledgement, where really what we need to do is persuade people to understand us, not just to have a mandate.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, strategic planning team. This is Desiree Hennon from UC San Diego, second year delegate. I know that we did a CUCSA meeting on this, and I thought it was really powerful as well. And we were able to invite location partners to come and view the work that you did, which I think is really comprehensive. Curious if there's a plan to allow some kind of coaching for locations and groups at locations to help guide them through the strategic plan, either through personal coaching or if we can create some kind of document or guidelines to help them through the process.
Yeah, that's a terrific idea. It's not something we've given any thought to, but I will say we've gotten very positive feedback about, for those who are unaware, we did a CUCSA chat. Go to the CUCSA chats, they're really cool, quick plug. But we did a CUCSA chat about our process for planning strategic plan. Essentially, it was like, we strategic planned and you can too. So based on positive response to that, I do think there might be an opportunity, and we're talking about creating partnerships with staff assemblies, locations, strengthening that, and that could be a great avenue to it. So I welcome that suggestion and forward it to our future leadership.
Very good. Thank you to Strategic Plan for all of their work. Now I'll turn it back over to Dennis.
Thank you very much, John. And I want to take a moment to thank all of our work groups, including internal operations, for all of your effort over the last year. As an executive board, one of the few promises that I wanted to make sure that we created and kept was that we wouldn't allow you to fail in public or to embarrass yourselves. And seeing the intentionality and the hard work throughout the year, we knew you would be able to really bring it home today. And each one of you did that. So I thank you so much for your time and all of your effort. Now let's move over because we have eager web audiences ready to give us questions and feedback. So we're going to move over to the Q&A portion for our web audience. I invite those of you who are watching online to use the Q&A feature. And from here, I will welcome back our work group chairs, who will be answering questions. And I'll pass it over to Katie and Austin to facilitate.
Thank you very much. We have had a number of questions come in for our work groups, as well as quite a few comments, which we will go through those that we have time for and share any we do not afterwards. So our first two questions are going to be for the advancement work group. So the first question asks, what do our competitors offer? So I wonder if you can speak to what research you did or hope to do into the advancement opportunities and programs other of employer competitors offer.
Great question. To be honest, we didn't do a whole lot of benchmarking compared to competitors. If you're talking about just by offer, you mean like compensation, we do have the great tool, which I would refer people to check out, that compensation did, that if you want to just look at what people are offering in terms of salaries, you can compare to that. In terms of like things beyond salary and benefits, I would say just from looking at like UC does have a good benefits program in general for like retirement benefits. So when comparing, I think that is definitely like a plus for us. In terms of comparing, I think though, like the pathways, it's the main area I think we could grow in. Compared to a lot of our competitors, there aren't very clear career pathways. So like a lot of folks kind of cap out, I think, in their position. They're not quite sure what is the next step forward. So when we're looking at that in terms of advancement opportunities and what people offer, I think other companies offer a very much more clear pathway of like, here's how you go in our organization. Like my partner works at Google. She just got promoted to level 5. At the end of the year, she has a review. They figure things out. Are you going to get a promotion or not? Whereas me in my office, I work at the Career Center. I'm an assistant director. We have a review for like Achieve Together. And then basically like, that's it. She's like, good job. But we're not quite sure what the pathway forward is.
Thank you. And can you speak to whether the health location human resource officers offices were also included in the data collection? Or did you mainly focus on campus locations?
For what data? Or it's just...
I think it was a general question.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So in terms of what we're looking for, collecting data was just basically on those areas of focus. So for the mentorship programs, things like that, career coaching. So if that location did have like a health center, we tried to look at that as well. But for the most part, yeah, it was just general. We tried to include both.
Thank you very much. And our next questions are for the wellness team. The first one says, private sector companies have implemented no meeting Wednesdays to allow people to work without meetings. Could this be something that's feasible in UC?
Some departments have done similar things, no meeting Wednesdays or no meeting Fridays. There's some fun acronyms for that, but could we do a UC-wide one? I think that would be a little complicated, but I think starting at the department level is a great place to start for those types of things. Department or even campuses could potentially implement things to give folks some strategic time to think and plan and work on their goals.
Thank you. Our next question says, thank you so much for this presentation and work. There was a slide demonstrating how the lack of staff growth compared to staff and faculty is contributing to the problem of burnout, but I did not see a direct recommendation to address this piece. Is there a reason why this was not recommended, or do you think this will be accomplished through one of your other recommendations?
So the recommendation that's related to that slide, and I think you're referring to the graph that talked about staffing numbers on average over the last 7 years on the various undergraduate campuses. And the recommendation is really to make sure that is explicit in our hiring goals. So each campus has hiring goals, as well as the university for faculty, as well as for increasing students. And so the recommendation there is to also have a very explicit hiring goal for staff. How we do that is multifaceted, and how that would be accomplished would be in partnership with talent acquisition and retention efforts.
And thank you for the question. in addition to everything that was just said, this delegation has been in conversation with UCOP to ask for a greater clarity or emphasis on messaging around that, where you say specific numbers about the increase for the number of students you'd like to see, and a specific number about the increased number of faculty you'd like to see, asking for that clarity of an increased specific number for the staff you'd like to see as well. That would show intentionality. So this group is advocating for that kind of messaging because we know they are working on those plans. It is not the case that staff were forgotten and overlooked. It's just that they weren't mentioned in specific intentional numbers. So we're asking for that greater clarity.
Thank you. And also, let's see, has there been any discussion and or consideration to do an assessment of open positions that are aging past 60 to 90 days? For example, listing the open positions, what has or is being done to fill them? Is there an existing employee doing the work? And if yes, how are they being compensated for the additional scope of work? In addition, checking on their well-being before they're burnt out. For hard to fill positions, could they be used as a pathway to form fellowships for interested staff to learn a new skill and fill these positions?
I think that really addresses all of our work groups pretty well. And so, yes, I do think they're all integrated and in many ways. And maybe some of the other folks would like to answer this question as well, but there is, that I know of, there is not someone specifically looking at that data. However, I think all campuses and all CHROs are meeting regularly to discuss this issue and working with outside groups as well, I believe, on what that might look like, consultants, et cetera.
Yeah, specifically, I would rely on our Office of the President system-wide HR colleagues to be running that kind of data analysis because they're the ones with the access to that data. And then we would want to partner with them to say, and what are you learning? We do make requests like that whenever we hear, anecdotally, we think there's a problem. Great, hey, system-wide HR, can we have that data? And then where possible, they do provide that data.
All right, our next question is for the strategic planning group. And this one says, please say more about how to build institutional memory.
Oh, that is such a good question. So institutional memory came up a lot. It is something, so at least in the case of CUCSA, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of volunteer orgs, we have limited 2-year terms. So literally the institutional memory of the group refreshes every 2 years. It's a whole new slate of people, and what people assume are traditions that have stood forever are really just traditions that have been around for a year and a half. So how do you actually effectively build and develop that memory? And it's important because there's a sense that we sometimes repeat ourselves, that since no one was here for the work that was done by amazing work groups a few years ago, we aren't able to build upon that and benefit from the foundation that they've laid. So a few things that we're recommending, at least in CUCSA, to help with that are one, better integration of alumni members. We have lots of really great alumni out there who are looking for ways to, interweave into our work. It's always a bit of a balancing act for, how much do you bring them in? They're not full delegates, but at the same time, we want to get their interaction. So finding meaningful ways for people like that to interface is what's really important, and it really needs to be structural. So that's one of the things we'll potentially be looking at, and is one of the recommendations in the strategic plan. Another item that we're looking at is doing a really more intentional transition of power during the summer. So historically, our trajectory for the next year has been set by our chair, and that will still very much be the case. But we would like to adjust strategies with intentionality. That would mean taking time to look back at what did we want to accomplish during this year? What did we accomplish? What kinds of challenges presented themselves? What new opportunities are before us? And then thinking about what does the delegation feel is important going into next year. So what that does is it forces us to reflect on where we've been in deciding where we're going, which will hopefully create a little bit more momentum in terms of some of these efforts.
I feel compelled to add a little bit to this just from the executive board standpoint as well. As an organization, we recently, over the last couple of years, have woven in some of those components too. For example, we created a council for our past chairs to help provide that institutional memory, and I'm sure some of them are watching now, so hi. And another thing that we did recently, even in our bylaws, is shifting some of our roles, because historically our operations officer, who sort of serves as the nerve center of a lot of our operations, was a one-year term. And that creates some challenges when it comes to relearning processes. So this year, one of the things we were able to do was give that a 2-year term. And the idea is that regardless of how new a board is, there's always at least a few people who understand how it was done before. So I think that in conjunction with what the strategic plan is doing, will hopefully continue to bolster that memory. So that way, we're not just repeating and just continuing to cycle the same ideas over and over. Last piece I'd share is we were very intentional about even making sure folks reviewed previous content when it comes to our work group reports, because a lot of these conversations are ones that CUCSA has been having for years. So I think between all of those sort of better practices to add the institutional memory from process, but also in terms of positions, hopefully will help to build that in the long term.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. And I was reminded of one more thing, probably gone way too long on time already, but I'll say it quickly. We are recommending that we create more visibility about the things that we've done before to build in a little bit more accountability and more follow-up on those issues. Once you get working on whatever you're doing today, it tends to be out of sight, out of mind for the things that you did yesterday. So we want to create more dedicated processes, maybe even roles around keeping track of past recommendations, how they're going today, whether we're making progress. And by keeping them on the radar, it will help to refresh that institutional memory about what we've done and where there are opportunities related to it.
That sounds great. So we have a number of comments to go through, but that is the end of the actual questions that have come in. So at this point, I'd like to open it up again to the delegation. If you have questions, please feel free to raise your table tent. And while you are thinking of questions and indicating, I will continue to go through some of the questions. I would welcome the chairs to respond to any comments if you want to, or if not, we will just go through the comments so that everyone can hear them. There were a number of comments for total compensation. And so I'm going to summarize a few of them that are very similar. Regarding tuition remission, UCOP has a working group that is studying tuition assistance that started earlier this year. And the comment encouraged us to reach out to ask who's on the work group and what they've done so far. And there's an additional comment regarding tuition remission, indicating that it's under consideration as a partial remedy to the grad student funding situation. Someone has heard that. And looks like there's a group led by folks at UCSC that is putting together a plan for shared equity to get system buy-in. So it sounds like there's some work happening across the system in regards to that, which is great to hear.
Time for me to respond? Great. Yes, to the first comment, thank you for the comment. It was, hey, by the way, there's this UCOP effort underway. Yes, we're very aware of that. And as Eric mentioned in her slides, we provided the results of our survey to John Bodenschatz, who is sitting on that committee. So yes, we're aware. We're very excited to see what happens. I would like to just make a comment of when we formulated our goals, the 4 efforts that we were going to pursue, that was done in September at the beginning of the year. So we formulated that goal, we moved forward with our process, and then we learned of this new rapidly concluding. I love the time frame that's happening with this, by the way. So yes, we're aware, and we're looking forward to the results very soon. The second one was for grad student remission, and that's not something that we looked into. That's a really great piece of information, and we'll bring it back and see what we can do with that. So thank you for the education. And then the third one was UC Santa Cruz about the shared equity program. My name is Nathan McCall. I work at UC Santa Cruz in McCall at ucsc.edu. Please let me know. I would not only want to know about that from my CUCSA standpoint, but I would want to know about it personally. So please contact me.
Thank you. There was one more comment for your group that suggested additionally partnering with the Academic Senate when the surveys that were discussed happen.
Great idea. Thank you.
All right. The next comment is for the wellness group, and it says, thank you for all your work on this presentation. I think a mechanism for campus accountability is needed. I noticed that some campuses have a strategic plan and others don't. I would advocate for each campus being accountable for an up-to-date and functional strategic plan that many of the initiatives mentioned here could be included in. That's fine. I'm finding the next comment on my document. All right. All right, under strategic planning, we had several comments that suggested or said, I hope one strategy to maximize the current receptivity is to, help if I read this correctly. I hope one strategy is to maximize the current receptivity of the regents to the work that was suggested.
What was if you could repeat the middle word there?
The current receptivity.
Receptivity.
Receptivity. Got it. Yeah. This is, I believe that at the end of the year, there's going to be a presentation actually to the, there's always a presentation to the regents by our CUCSA chair, but I believe they're planning to include information about our strategic plan in it. So that would definitely be one way to get it front and center, especially in terms of some of the messaging that we want to be doing going forward. But if you look at the full document, and to plug it, check out the QR code in the document. There are a couple things that relate directly to regents and how we can get messaging in front of them. But yeah, I think that that's going to be a key piece.
Thank you very much. And a general question for everyone. What is the best way for folks with specific feedback on any individual workgroup recommendations, either now or after the formal reports come out, to get in touch to give feedback?
We're going to contact us on the site.
General contact.
Do we have a general contact us on the website?
Let's see. It's CUCSA@gmail.com.
CUCSA@gmail.com would be the best place. Or the CUCSA@gmail.com. And I would say that's probably an answer we probably should have had faster, and everyone in the delegation should probably know offhand. So that's a great piece to take into our planning around being a stronger partner.
We'll make sure we put the actual email into the chat as well for everyone online, and it should be available on our website as well, which you all have in the chat. Do we have any additional questions from the delegation?
Do we have time to ask a question of the folks online? Okay, we've received a request to ask a question of the folks online. So I will pass to Nathan.
I love asking questions. So for everybody online, I assume we cannot stick around for just minutes of silence waiting. But what the total compensation work group would like to receive feedback on is other modules you think would be helpful on the understanding your compensation situation. So currently we have the total compensation module. The suggestion was to add a housing cost with the federal and state data for next year, to add that module. What would be another module that would be helpful for just the regular everyday employee to understand their compensation situation? And I asked that because I used to work in compensation, and so these rules are kind of second nature for me. I understand this, and it's hard for me to think about not understanding them, and yet most people don't work in compensation. So I need to know from you what is the best way to add, or what things should be added.
And I would welcome folks who have feedback to email us at thecucsa@gmail.com. And thank you very much to our work group chairs for taking some time to answer and give some feedback to everything. So as we close out, I wanted to take a little bit of time just to talk about the few things that we have left for this particular term. The first one will be happening next week. We will be holding a town hall that will be presented to all staff, where there will be an abbreviated version of these reports. And then there'll also be some short Q&A. We welcome you to participate in that as well. I believe the links will also be into chat if you'd like to sign up. And then we also invite you on June 27th to join us for another system-wide conversation to close out the year that will be with leadership from UC administrative management professionals, as well as the staff advisor to the regents. And this will be a follow-up to our January mid-year check-in, and you're welcome to join that as well. And then finally, in July, as alluded to earlier, we will have an opportunity to present our overall findings to the Board of Regents, and that would be available on streaming. So we do encourage you to check that out as well. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to John to close things out.
Very good. For the mic. Thank you, Dennis. I'd like to start off by taking a moment to recognize our incoming leadership board for CUCSA 23-24. Joining the role as immediate past chair is Dennis McIver. Elected to the chair-elect position is Jen Bowser. And we have Jeremy Thacker, who is going to be the incoming operations officer. And I will return next year to be the chair. In the coming year, we'll continue the great work that was started by these work groups here, and by the work groups that came before them. And I'm looking forward to our focus in starting off and launching the strategic plan that Jeremy was talking about. He kind of got roped right back in, and as he was talking about that implementation, he's going to be party to that. We're also going to continue to work to strengthen our partnerships that we have across the system and forge new ones. And moreover, and of course, we're going to continue to be a strong advocate and voice for staff. I'm very excited and encouraged about the coming year, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to share with you all next year the accomplishments that we've made and more when we have this meeting again. We want to end off by thanking everybody here in the room. Thank you for everybody there that joined us online. And I believe that these are powerful opportunities for us to gather together and share our thoughts, our ideas, and our knowledge as we work to make this university a better place for all staff. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and everybody be well.